biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can. Wait, hold on.
A fiery exchange erupted on The View when Alyssa Farah Griffin forcefully challenged Sunny Hostin, breaking apart the long-standing claim that Trump's rise was fueled solely by racism. Griffin's refusal to accept that oversimplified narrative laid bare the fractures not only within the media but also across the never-Trump conservative camp. The clash marked a turning point where strategy and pragmatism are beginning to outweigh ideological purity. Viewers could feel the tension as Griffin stood her ground, revealing just how much the conversation around Trump has shifted.
I think it was the right thing to do, and I've heard a lot of folks on the left coming after Joe and Mika saying, don't normalize him. Well, 75 million plus American voters normalized Donald Trump by making him President-elect Donald Trump. And this notion that if sort of the resistance who opposes him stayed in their safe bubbles, sat on their hands and just complained about him for 4 years, that would have a bigger impact than sitting down. I talked to Mika, actually. They met with him for over 90 minutes. They raised very valid concerns. They both see themselves as opinion journalists who want to actually be able to engage the person that they talk about every day, actually be able to raise issues with them when they're concerned. And in the same way that I thought it was right for Joe Biden to meet with him, and that I think it's right for presidents to meet with foreign adversaries to try to find diplomatic relations and ways to bring people together and solve problems, this is absolutely the right thing. I would sit down with Donald Trump. I would interview Donald Trump. And I'll go a step further. I hope good people work for him. We need to stop demonizing people because they supported a man who just became president of the United States. We should hope good people are around him and smart journalists are challenging.
Look, the bottom line is that America needs a free press that is willing to speak truth to power right now, more than ever. And I think that we have to be very clear-eyed when we think about the president-elect and cover the president-elect. And I don't think you need to sit down for 90 minutes at Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring to be able to speak truth and to be able to cover a story. So maybe they're not journalists in the true sense. Maybe they're saying that they're opinion journalists. But we have to remember that Trump is the guy who ushered in the era of fake news. He is the guy who ushered in alternative facts. He is the guy who attacked 3 Black female journalists. He's the guy that revoked Jim Acosta's press credentials for asking him a question. And so I think that this president-elect, I hate to say it, would like nothing more than to have only Fox News cover him, would like nothing more than a state-sponsored media. And I don't think he can be trusted in the way that other presidents can be trusted. This is an aberration.
Alyssa Farah Griffin's evolution on The View has been striking. Once a sharp Trump critic, she now defends figures like Joe Scarborough and Noy Grinsky for engaging with him, arguing that dialogue is far more effective than isolation. Griffin insists that the millions of Trump supporters cannot be dismissed as fringe, but must be recognized as a critical part of the electorate. Her stance clashed head-on with Sunny Hostin, who maintained that racism and misogyny were central to Trump's victory, pointing to demographic breakdowns that underscore stark divides by race and education. Griffin pushed back with a different framing, citing Trump's unexpected gains among Latino voters and other minorities, and contending that his appeal was also rooted in economic fears and a desire for stability. The divide on set was clear: Hostin's lens of systemic prejudice versus Griffin's call for dialogue and pragmatism. Their exchange underscored the limits of ideological bubbles and, the growing realization that demonization alone is no path to national unity.
That as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that we don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but it's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And, you know, the facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris. It's very clear. I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can.
Wait, hold on. Calm down. Everybody just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
The so-called never-Trumpers, once hailed as the conscience of conservatism, are quickly fading. Their fierce opposition never changed outcomes, and now their influence is battered, their audience shrinking, and their credibility caught in limbo. Republican voters don't trust them, while liberal allies never fully embraced them. The result: a movement running out of ground. This decline has forced a broader recalibration. The Mar-a-Lago meeting, where media figures engaged directly with Trump, signaled a new pragmatism among his critics. Lisa Farah Griffin's recent pushback against liberal orthodoxy has only fueled speculation that ABC itself may be seeking a more openly pro-Trump presence to balance the panel together. These shifts highlight one fact: Trump's imprint on American politics endures. Allies and critics alike are being forced to adjust to his staying power. The question is no longer whether Trump dominates the conversation, but how everyone else adapts to it. When ideology body slams common sense, everyone pays the price. People suffer, the environment chokes, and the hypocrisy burns hotter than the wildfires they could have prevented with one smart decision and a little less #activism. And that's a wrap for today's video. If this gave you a laugh, a gasp, or even a rage-fueled headshake, hit like and smash subscribe, because the chaos is only getting started. See you in the next one.